today. Happy, what is it? Sunday. It's Father's Day, of course, it's Sunday. But yeah, I'm up a little bit earlier and doing a live earlier than what I usually do. But what's kind of nice about it is I don't have my greenhouse lights on, so we're in the natural light, and then also too, the benefit of doing this earlier is I will be taking you out to a couple of my rose gardens, and we'll be taking a look at some of the rose seedlings that are outside. Kind of show you, what they're doing, how they're doing and growing, and a couple of them are blooming, so I'm kind of excited about showing you that. So if anybody has any questions or you just want to chat, just let me know. But I figured we'll start out in the greenhouse because I am still in the process of transplanting some of my seedlings. So as you can see, I did this a little bit earlier, this seedling, and then I also have some more seedlings here that I got to transplant. A little late finishing up, but what happened is I ended up with like 7,000 rose seeds. Welcome in, how are you today? But I had about 7,000 rose seeds that I got out of my rose hips and stratified and got them planted. And I did realize that 7,000 seeds are just a little bit too much for me, in the backyard because life happens, right? And I had a couple of, medical things going on with the family as well. So I fell behind on my 7,000 rose seeds. So next year I'm not going to be planting nearly as many just because I can, need to stay caught up. But I do have some of my rose seedlings here in these little packs. So we'll go ahead and just hang out for a little bit. I will transplant some of them, and then we'll go ahead and go out. I'll take you to the other greenhouse with some of my seedlings. I have some outside, as well as a couple of my cuttings I did last year, which I'm planning on doing here pretty soon for this year. So I'll show you those, and then I'll also be hey, how are you doing? Thanks for coming in and saying hello. Celestino, sorry if I mispronounced that. But yeah, I'll be taking you to a couple of the rose gardens. I've been doing cross-pollinating as well. So I'll show you the ones I've been doing, and maybe we can find a couple of rose hips that have just formed. I think I'm about a month in on the pollinating, so hopefully I have a couple I can show you that are starting to form the rose hips, because it does take about it takes about 3 to 4 months for rose hips to fully mature and contain fully developed seeds, right? So after you pollinate a flower, or after a rose is pollinated, it can be open pollination from, the bees or pollinators. They do need to stay on the rose plant for about 3 to 4 months. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yep, this is my greenhouse. I did build it. So this is a lean-to, and I'll show you when we go outside. I'll show you the outside view. But yeah, it's pretty good. I built it, and it is a lean-to. So this right here is the side of my garage. It's pretty much three-sided. But what's really nice about it is I don't need as much material, and the roof is really easy to build because it's just one slope, right? So here is a rose seedling. This did grow from seed, or I planted this seed earlier this year. As you can see, it did bloom. I need to get that off, but it did bloom. So when you do grow roses from seed, there's a good chance that you can get flowers as early as 6 weeks after your rose seed germinates. So we're just transplanting it. So you can see, it's starting to get a little root bound. I like to transplant them in 4-inch pots. But you can put them in the ground or in gallon size containers. But because I did have 7,000 rose seeds, um, space was an issue, right? So I kind of had to, I kind of use the 4-inch pots and work my way on up, because a lot of the roses that have aren't interesting, or they are show to be unhealthy. I do a process called culling, which you actually you get rid of some of the seedlings. So, and then when you have as many seedlings as like what I do, right? I think I started out with about 1,500 rose seedlings this year. You can't keep them all. Let's see. You said it right. Purchased some rose seeds online, but I think I messed up. I put my seeds in the freezer. First time wanting to grow roses for my wife the first time. Yeah, so rose seeds, and I do have a video on on cold stratification for rose seeds. That is a process. Rose seeds need to feel like they have gone through a winter before they even think about growing. So a lot of people don't realize that rose seeds do need to be chilled to make them feel like they have gone through a winter. I do suggest, and what I do and what most people do that are successful with growing roses from seed, is placing them in the refrigerator. The freezer sometimes can be a little bit too cold. When the seeds are permanently frozen, then the embryo inside can get damaged and your seed will no longer be viable, right? So the refrigerator is cold enough to make the seed feel like it's going through a winter, but not so cold to where it's getting potentially damaged from the freezing temperatures. Let's see. Hey, Mr. Newman, thanks for coming in for a little bit. You have a good night. Let's see. My grandmother grows the same ones by the window in huge quantities. Yeah, roses are awesome. I love roses. Definitely my passion. I like all plants, but roses definitely are my favorite. So I do have, so I have tags for all of my roses, but I initially started out with the Sharpie, which is a water-based permanent marker, and I have found that the sun, when they are outdoors, the marker, they fade really, really quick. So I did get, I think from like a hobby store, I got a permanent marker that is oil-based. So I've been kind of writing over the ones that I had written originally or initially with the Sharpie for the oil base. And the oil base, they don't fade nearly as bad as the water based, like Sharpies. So just a little tip there, if you're, writing on tags and they are going to be outside, use an oil based permanent marker. You're in Arizona. It's 113 degrees today. Wow, that is hot. So I thought we were pretty warm here. Last week we were, I think, in the low 100s, but now it's gotten a little bit cooler. I think we're like upper 80s, lower 90s now, and I'm in eastern Washington state, so I'm on the other side of the mountains from Seattle. So everybody knows Seattle is being kind of rainy and all that, but in eastern Washington, it is very desert-like here. We're very, very dry, and very not a whole lot. You are more than welcome. You are more than welcome, and also too please check out the videos I have out. I have a video on the cold stratification, which is super important, I would argue, with growing roses from seed. And the hybridizing process, the breeding process, I would say that the cold stratification is probably the most important step to be successful. A lot of people don't realize that rose seeds need to be cold stratified, and they initially just plant their rose seeds, and they will find out that you know, none of them ended up growing or germinating for them, and they thought that, you know, they think the seeds were bad, or, you know, that they don't have a green thumb. But, you know, a lot of times because they didn't cold stratify their rose seeds, either at all or not long enough or not properly, you know, where was I? Sorry, it's like really early for me. I'm usually a night owl, but I woke up really, really early today. But yeah, so, you know, those seeds could be completely viable still, right? But they're just waiting for that winter to arrive. So even if you don't have seeds, if you planted seeds, but you didn't cold stratify them, you actually could stratify them at any point after you discover they didn't grow. And, you know, put them in the refrigerator for about 3 months, about 12 weeks, the duration of what a winter is in the wild, right? Because the rose seeds don't know that they're not in the wild, right? So, you know, the best chance of success with the whole entire process is to imitate nature as close as you can, right? Let's see. Do I ever clone roses? Yeah, so I do. I have cuttings. Let me grab one here for you. I'll show you. Let's see. Okay, so this one here is a cutting that I took last year, and this is actually from one of my own hybrids. Yeah, so this one is a cutting from last year. You can see the stem. This is the stem that that I cut off from the plant, and I applied rooting hormone to it and put it, you know, in a medium, and you know, it ended up rooting. And I just transplanted this not too long ago in this 1 gallon pot, but you can see all of the new growth. But yeah, that's how you clone a rose, is by cutting. So either it's on its own root, where you root the stem, or you graft it onto the rootstock or the roots of another rose. So anytime that you hear the word graft, that's what that means, right? So it's not on its own roots, but it was grafted onto the root of another variety. But I like to do cuttings. Own root roses have their own benefits. And I enjoy the process too. I do enjoy the process as well. So, really good question. So here is another rose seedling. It's kind of fallen apart. It could have been in here, but, you know, like I said, I'm wanting to finish up all my seedling transplants, and that way I can use this greenhouse for my cuttings, which is my next step. So yeah, thank you. This actually, I'm a little bit behind on these seedlings that that are still needing to be done in this greenhouse. I planted about 7,000 rose seeds this year, which is way too much, way too much for me. And I also had we have a couple, you know, medical issues with a couple of my family members this year. I lost my father-in-law earlier, but, you know, was helping take care of him. And then my spouse actually has lung cancer. We found that out a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to be going through surgery in less than 2 weeks. So been kind of focused on that. So, you know, the watering, you know, with these seedlings, I didn't do as well as what I should have. So a lot of them dried out. Hey, Norma Jeannie. That's awesome that Norma Jeannie. So my grandmother, actually, her name was Norma Jean, and she went by Jeannie as well. So that's awesome. Let's see, what is the most unique rose I have made? Do I have that picture in here? Do I have that picture in here? I do not have that picture in here. I'm gonna finish this one seedling up, and then we'll go ahead and do the tour. I'll show you some of the rose gardens, my other greenhouse, the seedlings outside. But we'll take a quick detour into, I think, the garage, where I have a picture of probably my favorite rose that I've hybridized, which is really, really cool. So this year I am planning on making a lot of rose cuttings from that rose, so I can clone it. So then hopefully I can have some of those roses available for people who may want, that variety of rose. And then I'm also looking into submitting it to the American Rose Society. They have rose trials, trial gardens, where they kind of, grow the roses, and they kind of, rate them, and kind of rate, how well they grow in different climates throughout the country. So let's see. Okay, so Norma Jeannie, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sorry for my loss, and thank you for your prayers as well. But we're with the cancer and with the surgery, we're staying very optimistic about it, and it helps to, the surgeon, very good surgeon, and very confident that because they believe it's stage 1, so they're removing the upper right lobe, and they believe that removing that, they're going to be getting rid of all the cancer, so we'll be cancer free after the surgery. So let's see, it is 20 minutes past noon, so it is 12:20. Okay, so your rose seeds, you can't get your rose seeds to sprout. So I was talking about this a little bit earlier, but probably one of the most common reasons why people can't get their rose seeds to germinate or sprout, or to start growing, is because they did not cold stratify their rose seeds first. So rose seeds do need to feel like they have gone through a winter before they even think about germinating and growing. So I am from the United States, in Washington State. So if you get rose seeds, we need to imitate winter for them before we can get, before we plant them, before they even start thinking about growing. They do need to feel like they have gone through a winter. So the easiest way to do that is by taking your rose seeds, placing them in between a moist paper towel, and placing that like in a Ziploc baggie, and putting it in the refrigerator, not the freezer, but the refrigerator, for about 12 weeks, for about 3 months. And 3 months, that's, the average, winter out in the wild, right? So if you didn't cold stratify your seeds, Jeannie, that is probably the reason why you didn't get them to grow and sprout. And if you did, then we can discuss a little bit further. Let's see. Do you typically look for in fridge germination, or always go with the set time on cold strat? Yeah, so I do use the refrigerator, usually the crisper drawer, although this last year I had about 7,000 seeds, so I ended up getting a little mini fridge just for my rose seeds. And I think I kept it right around 37 degrees Celsius, or Fahrenheit, sorry, not Celsius, Fahrenheit, but I guess it doesn't matter if it's Fahrenheit or Celsius, but the temperature of the refrigerator is really, really good, perfect temperature for rose seeds. Yeah, so and that's the unfortunate thing is if you do a lot of like research or you're on YouTube and you watch other people giving suggestions on rose seeds. Um, a lot of them, or online even, a lot of them will say, you know, um, 6 weeks, right? And 6 weeks for some rose seeds does work, but for a lot of rose seeds, it's not long enough. Because we try to imitate nature as close as possible, right? And 6 weeks in nature, in the wild, um, isn't a normal winter, right? So if it's in the winter time, right, and it warms up for a little bit, the seeds kind of know, there's a good chance it's going to get cold again because it doesn't feel like winter shouldn't be finished yet. So we're going to hold off germinating and wait for it to get cold again, because we're expecting it to get cold again. Let's see. How soon is too soon to clone? I actually prefer doing my rose cuttings earlier in the year. So usually after the first or the second flush of blooms. When I deadhead, I will, because when you deadhead, you're cutting the spent flower off, right? But that stem underneath that flower is actually it's a semi-hardwood, but that's the perfect kind of stem to take cuttings from. So when I deadhead, I'll just cut a little bit more than what I normally would with deadheading, and then that stem below is what I use for my cuttings. And I usually do that, the first or second flush of flowers. With the reason being is that I'm allowing more time before winter arrives for the cuttings to, number one, grow roots, but have roots that are more mature, a little bit older, so they are able to handle the cold temperatures of winter a little bit better. Let's see. Do I have a video on that? Yes, I do. I do have a video on rose cuttings as well. Okay, perfect. So what we'll do is I'll just kind of show you kind of around the yard, show you my seedlings. I'll show you some of my roses I've been working on hand pollinating, cross hybridizing. I did a few more today. All right, so I'm just going to unplug the phone, and then as promised, I'm just going to take a quick detour into the garage, and I will show you a picture of my favorite rose so far that I have hybridized. So let me know what you think, because I am planning on doing quite a bit of cuttings from it. Okay, so here is the rose my favorite rose that I've hybridized. So just, you don't really see this form of rose with this color. Usually roses with this form, the old garden rose, they tend to be, like white, pink, purple, but usually not a red like this. So a lot of fun. And that's what's fun about, breeding roses, and growing them from seed, is that they're all genetically different. And you don't necessarily know what you're going to get. Even if a rose is self-pollinated, the seeds are not clones of the parent. Just because of genetics and, recessive traits and blah, blah, blah. But every single rose seedling is going to be different than its parent and their siblings. So actually, I think I have one here. So let me flip this around. So here's some of my seedlings that grew from seed this year. Let's see. Okay, so this rose right here, you can see that it's yellow. And this was and I need to deadhead it, but this rose was a self-pollination from a rose called Whimsy. And actually what we'll do is I will flip this around here real quick. We'll go ahead and we will take this rose, which you can see it is yellow, and I will show you its parent rose. So it was self-pollinated. So the rose the rose variety is called Whimsy, but Whimsy is both the mother and father of this rose. But I want to show you the difference, and that just kind of ties into what I was talking about. It looks very different than its parent. Okay, so right here, this pink one is this rose's parent, both its mother and father. Let me go ahead and switch this around again, and we can get a little bit closer here so you can see. Here's a little bit of a fresher one, but you can see that it's pink and it has, has a little bit of white to it. So I do have seeds available online for sale for anybody that doesn't have access to rose seeds and wants to try it, or if they just, want seeds from a variety that they don't have themselves. But as you can see, the rose on top, the pink one, is the mother and father. It was self-pollinated, and its child is just below it, the yellow one. So, yeah, this rose here, this is a miniature rose, but miniature roses do get, quite large. They're shorter. I probably up to my knee. But all of these roses here are miniature roses. And the reason why, as you can see, I have a ton of flowers that have finished blooming here, but I don't deadhead because I want all of the rose hips. I do get seeds from it, obviously, and these are seeds that I do have that I will have available online this year for sale from Whimsy. But as you can see, right there is the beginning, the formation of a rose hip. So this flower was pollinated from the bees. It was open pollination. And yeah, thank you. After I'm done with this, I'll kind of tell you a little bit about purchasing seeds, whether it's from me or not. I don't do this to make, $1 million or anything. I do it because I'm so passionate about it. And I know that the seeds that I have available for people, I've been successful with myself. And it's a lot of fun. But unfortunately, there's, some red flags with some of the vendors that have rose seeds. But we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But all of these flowers were pollinated. So this is the beginning of the rose hip, which is just below where the flower is going to be, was. And it takes about 3 to 4 months for it to fully develop seeds. If you want seeds, you do need to not deadhead the roses that you're wanting to get the rose hips from. They do need to stay on the plant so they can continue to develop and grow the seeds. And it takes about 3 to 4 months. So in about 3 to 4 months, or a little bit less than that now because these have already flowered. But this rose hip will start swelling. Well, you can see that it's already starting to swell. Let's take a look at, like this flower. It's flowering now. But if you look underneath it, where the rose hip is going to be, if I can get it to get into focus, you can see just underneath the flower, that's the ovary. The ovary is also the rose hip. But it's much smaller than those, right? But it takes about 3 to 4 months, and you will know when it is ripe when the seeds are fully developed, because it will turn from that green color into a bright orange or red color, usually. Let's see. So here's another one. It's a little bit larger, and then I think I did some, I know I did some of my own pollinations here. So the ones I hand pollinated myself, I tagged, but because there's so many on here and it is a miniature rose, so I have a tag kind of on the stem below that, the mass of flowers, but I took a little bit of like a string, and I tied the individual flower just underneath the individual flower, so that way I know which one I actually pollinated. But that rose hip right there is from my own hybrid, and I have a couple of more in there, but it was done a little bit earlier, a little over a month ago, so a couple of them are hidden underneath. Let's see. Seeds from your moonstone and blue girl. Yeah, so gunpowder, if you do, let me know. Let me get this flipped around. Let me know, if you do get seeds from it, because not all roses make good parents, right? They may not make good seed parents, or the mother, where they do, grow the hips and the seeds, and then the father, the pollen parent, may not be viable with the pollen. So, give it a try. I always suggest, whatever roses that you have, try to make as many different combinations of pollinations as possible. That way you can see, what roses give you hips that give you viable seeds. What roses that used as pollen ended up giving you seeds as well. And then that way, moving forward, in the following years, you'll know which roses that you can pollinate, and you'll know which roses that you can get, pollen from, and, what roses to avoid altogether, right? If you know it doesn't work, why spend the time trying to, work with it? Let's see, how long have I been growing? I have been growing roses, let's see, seriously into roses, I think when I was 15, so about 25 years. I probably shouldn't have said that. I just aged myself, but yeah, about 25 years, in one way, shape, form, or whatever. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at another one of my rose gardens. So here is, and as you can see, I don't do a lot of deadheading, because I am intending on getting seeds from, thank you, Jeannie, I appreciate that. Thank you. But I don't deadhead because I am intending on getting hips and seeds. So this rose here, let's see if I can find you a fresh flower that is opened up. So yeah, there's a couple there, but you can see they kind of fade. But this rose is called Easy Does It. Beautiful rose, and I love the ruffles on the petals. And last year, I had just tested this rose to see if it would naturally give me rose hips. So I allowed the bees to pollinate this for me. It did give me hips. It gave me viable seeds, and the seeds had a very, very high germination rate. So this year, I will have seeds available from this rose as well online. So, and as you can see, I do have a couple of tags somewhere in there. I'm planning on doing more pollinating of these. But yeah, so let's see if I can find any. So you can see, just the beginning of the rose hip, and, just like the other ones, it does take about 3 to 4 months. And that's why I do not deadhead these roses, because they need to stay on the plant so it can fully develop seeds. So I just wait for the rose hips to swell. They will turn usually a bright yellow or orange. And at that point, they kind of get a little fleshy, right? So if you go to, apples are actually in the rose family. But, I like to think of a ripe rose hip kind of like an apple from the grocery store. So if you find a ripe apple, in the produce section, and you kind of give it a little bit of a squeeze, it's still kind of hard, but it's not rock hard. It kind of has a little bit of a fleshy feel. Ripe rose hips kind of have that same feel. So if they're a bright color and they kind of have that fleshy feel, then you know that the hip is ripe and that the seeds inside are fully developed. Okay, so here is another rose. Let me know if it starts getting a little choppy. Sometimes my Wi-Fi acts up, and there's parts of my yard that, my test garden. I would love to show you my test garden back there of my hybrids, but I do know that my Wi-Fi does not work out there, so I need to find an extender or something. But here is another rose that that grows rose hips and viable seeds very, very well. It is called Pumpkin Patch. It's an orange color, but it kind of has a little bit of a brownish tint to it. And I absolutely love this rose. And because it does give me, it does make an incredible both pollen and seed parent. I just love this rose, Pumpkin Patch. And as you can see, I don't deadhead it, but that's on purpose, right? Let's see, you have 10 kinds of hybrid tea roses. Oh, so you're just beginning. So, there is such thing as getting bit by the rose bug, but you're off to a good start. Let's see, when you don't deadhead, does it slow the growth of new blooms? Yes, it does. So let me flip this around again. And I have a little table here because I was planning on already kind of just hanging out here for a little while, just as long as my battery on my phone doesn't go out on me. Let me see. Can you see me pretty well? It's really, it's glaring. Okay, so with deadheading your roses, so the reason why we deadhead roses, or flowers for that reason, this is annoying me. Okay, better. So when you are deadheading roses, the reason why we deadhead roses is to get more flowers. But the reason why that happens, right? So roses, other plants in general, their main purpose of life is to reproduce, right? To keep their species continuing on, right? And a lot of plants do that through the flowers, right? With the seeds. So roses, when they bloom, they are trying to make seeds. They're offering pollen for other roses, and they are also wanting to get pollinated so they can make seeds, right? So when we deadhead, when we get rid of a flower, then the rose kind of freaks out and they're like, oh my God, I don't have any seeds. I'm not able to reproduce. So I need to try again. So they will push out more flowers to try to get more seeds, right? Or try to get seeds. So it can, continue the species on, right? So when we don't deadhead and we allow our roses to, have the hips and develop seeds, then the rose will focus on developing and making the seeds, right? It doesn't necessarily put out a whole lot more flowers because it doesn't need to, right? It already has, you know, been reproduced. It already has seeds, so it's going to, all of its energy is going to go into making the seeds as opposed to the flowers, if that makes sense. So if it doesn't, let me know. Okay, so let's see. Don't know what you mean by deadheading. Yeah, so deadheading, basically what you're doing, and I'll flip the camera around and show you. But after a flower has finished blooming, or when it's, you know, kind of starting to look, you know, old, right? What we do is we cut and remove the flower off of the plant, right? We don't allow it to start making seeds. So with roses, so with deadheading, let me flip this around. Okay, so like this right here, right? This was a flower. So, you know, when they, you know, first start opening up, you know, you have the flower bud, they open up, they start looking tired. The petals will start falling off, and then once the petals are all gone, this is kind of what you're left with. And underneath here, I don't know if you were on when I showed you the other hips, but lighting. That's the amazing part about doing lives outdoors, right? But underneath here is where they grow the seeds. So when you deadhead and you want it to bloom more, you don't want it to go to seed, then you actually will remove this by, you know, cutting the stem back. So in this case, I would probably cut it back to down there. But the cool thing about that is, you know, if you want to do cuttings, then I do have a stem up above to where I would be able to make a cutting, to make a clone, and hopefully would be able to get this stem to root, and then I could have a brand new plant. Let's see. What do you feel is the best way to achieve more flowers on the rose bush? By deadheading. Deadheading is by far going to be the best practice to be able to get more flowers to bloom. So, you know, deadheading. So is, you know, the sooner that you can get, you know, those old or, you know, spent blooms off of the plant, the more, you know, the faster you're going to get more flowers. And then also making sure, I believe that you said you're in Arizona, so make sure that your rose stays well hydrated. If there is any kind of stress, you know, especially if they're dehydrated and not getting enough water, that's going to limit how many more flowers that your rose is going to give you. If it is going through a drought, then it's going to go more into a self-preservation mode, you know, to where it's like, okay, the little bit of water that I have, I'm just going to keep in the roots, you know, because that's what, you know, the roots is, you know, kind of, you know, the most important part of the plant's life, right? So, you know, it will focus more on keeping itself alive as opposed to flowering, right? And then also too, making sure that your roses are fertilized and fed well. Roses are fairly heavy feeders. They are hungry, so fertilizer is really important as well. So if they don't have the proper amount of nutrients, then they're not going to give you as many flowers. Let's see, do you use any kind of liquid fertilizer? I use all different sorts of fertilizers. That's one thing. If you talk to 100 different rose growers and ask them all what they fertilize with, you will get 100 different answers, right? And I've fallen victim to this too. You know, we all think, you know, try to find, you know, the golden, you know, ratio, or the, you know, the perfect, you know, menu for roses. But honestly, if you're using an all-purpose fertilizer, whether it's liquid or granule or whatever, as long as it's all-purpose, your roses will be fine. Just make sure that you follow the directions. You know, you don't want to use more fertilizer than what it calls for. So, you know, if you're using a liquid, you know, it's like, you know, 1 tablespoon per gallon. don't go 2 tablespoons per gallon. Don't just more fertilizer is not necessarily better, right? You can burn you can burn the roots. Um, so just make sure that you follow the directions. So don't add more fertilizer than what the directions say, and don't fertilize more than what the bottle or the box or whatever suggests. If it says fertilize once a month, don't fertilize it every other week, right? If it's fertilize every 2 weeks, don't do it every week, right? Um, let's see. Let's see. Great info, bud. And you're right. Once you start shopping for roses, it gets in your blood. I dropped some money this year. My wife laughed at me. You may or may not want to keep it a secret from your wife, but there's a good chance that you'll probably be buying more. So this property, let's see, I've been here, I moved over from Seattle area originally. I think I've been here about 14 years now. So with the roses in my garden, I think I'm up to about 50. But at my prime, when I was over in Seattle, I think I had like 130 some. So I'm slowly, getting there. But if you, count my seedlings, right, that changes every day. This year, with my seedlings, I had over 1,500 roses. So, that's just kind of how that goes. And here is another rose garden that I have. If I get any further, then I'll probably start buffering here. I am from, let's see, I am from Washington State in the U.S., so I'm on the West Coast. So I'm a couple states north of California that borders Canada. So yeah, Houston is hot, cold. Yeah, I have a couple friends. Actually, I have a breeder friend that breeds roses as well. I think from Austin. But I do remember them saying that, the temperatures can be quite wild there. So here in Eastern Washington, as you can see from the hills, it does not rain that often here. It is very dry here because we are on the other side of the Cascade Mountains. So the mountains does prevent a lot of the clouds and precipitation to come over in this area. So but I love it, because the sky, we get sun all the time, and it's nothing like Seattle where you get rain all the time. So let's see. I have a huge spread of roses. I'm going to try to master just hybrid teas. Yeah, absolutely. Hybrid teas are awesome roses. You get the one flower and a really long stem, so they are perfect, for cutting, in the vases and, to bring them inside. And the cool thing about that too, if you're growing hybrid teas and you are wanting to, take them indoors, then you're cutting the flowers off, so you're naturally deadheading your roses as well. So that's the benefit of hybrid teas if you are wanting to use them in vases, right? So yeah, thank you, Jeannie. It's a very it can be a a lot of people either like it or don't. A lot of people are like, it's a little bit too brown. So, all right. So here is my second greenhouse. The first one where we started out in the live, and we'll finish off in there as well. But I did build this one as well, and it's also a lean-to. So you can see my garage here is one wall, but it just has one slope, one pitch. But in there, and I think my Wi-Fi goes out, but in here, and I do have a AC, I need to have AC in here because it gets way too hot, even with that AC. But I have a couple fans in there for air movement, but I also have some seedlings in there as well. So I have maybe 100 and about 100 150 rose seedlings in here. But some of them did end up just, because of my spouse with the lung cancer, I just, haven't been as attentive as what I normally am with my rose seedlings. So watering was a little bit of an issue. A lot of them ended up not getting watered nearly as much as what they should have. So kind of the sicker roses are in that greenhouse. So in that way I can kind of baby them a little bit more. So let's see. Oh, perfect swamp rose. Now I have heard of that rose. I need to look that up again. I know I have looked at it. Sorry, I am plugging in my phone. That way battery doesn't go out on me. But I need to look at that one again. So I'm going to write that down somewhere. So then that way I can look at it again. Because I do like native roses. Do I water just at the base of the plant? So, yes. So when they are in, 4-inch pots, I do like to, normally I like to water at the base of the plant, right? But because I do have so many rose seedlings, a lot of times I just don't have the time for that. I mean, it would take me over an hour just to water them, and because of the heat and the dryness here, I do need to water my roses at least twice a day. But because it is so dry, just as long as I don't have water on the leaves during the heat of the day, like the evening, to where it can burn the leaves. A lot of times I just have a watering can, and I just water everything up above. If I do it early in the morning, then it gives enough time for the leaves to dry, and they dry pretty fast. So then that way I don't have to worry about a whole lot of disease. Like I don't get black spot here. It's too dry here for black spot. So that's one good thing about living here. And then powdery mildew out in the garden, I really don't get a whole lot. A little bit in the fall time, but outdoors, I don't really get the powdery mildew. Now I do get powdery mildew here in the greenhouse. So anytime that you have a greenhouse, if you have pests, if you have diseases, they can spread pretty quick in a greenhouse. So a lot of these in here, that I haven't gotten around to transplanting, they, underwatered, unfortunately, but that's life, right? And so they were kind of weak anyway, and I did have a bit of an outbreak with powdery mildew in here. So, that's just how it goes, right? I don't claim to be perfect, and that's that's what I'm about. What my channel is about. My videos is just for the average person. We're just average people that have backyards. I was intimidated and scared to even try to hybridize roses and grow them from seed for a really long time, and it prevented me from doing it for a really long time, just because of the fear and the intimidation. Because the people that had videos out, or the websites, a lot of these people had years and years of experience. There's some families, generations where they're breeders. A lot of them are companies where they have just gobs of money, and they have all these greenhouses, and they're big huge corporations and all that. And it's like, okay, I'm just like a normal person with a house and a backyard. I don't know if I can do this, right? So I finally decided to give it a go, and I'm like, wow, this is actually a lot easier than what I thought. And I love doing it so much. It's my passion. But I'm like, what, I'm gonna go on social media. I'm going to go on, YouTube. I'm going to make videos for other people that, are, kind of in that, same situation where you think it might be interesting, but you think that it's too difficult, or, that you're not able to do it. So that's, kind of, I'm like, hey, you absolutely can do it, from your own yard. It is quite a bit easier than what you think. Um, it's a learning hobby for sure, absolutely. And, it's one of those two. What I really love about hybridizing roses and growing them from seed is that, each and every year that I do this, I continue to learn. If I have a problem, if there's issues that I run into, it's like, okay, next year I'm going to try this a little bit differently, so I'm constantly evolving with, what I do and how, a little bit of how I go about doing it. But that's the fun, and learning my roses, as we were talking about earlier, learning which of my roses make good pollen parents, which of my roses make good seed parents, what cross of different varieties work really well and give me flowers or roses that are really unique, right? So that's, for me, this is the half the fun, right? The first year that I did it, um, it you do have to be patient with it. You can't rush it. It does take about almost a year from the time that a flower is pollinated to the time that you get seedlings, right? It's about 9 months. So you do have to be patient. You can't speed it up. It can be very difficult to keep your seeds in the refrigerator cold stratifying for 12 weeks, right? You just want to get them out as soon as possible. You look online, and, some people are like, oh, 2 weeks or 6 weeks, and then you hear someone like me say 12 weeks. You're going to be like, no, I want to do the 2 weeks or the 6 weeks, right? Because of the impatience thing. But, I'm here to tell you, you're going to have a lot better success if you cold stratify your rose seeds closer to that 12-week frame. Yeah, you're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. And thank you very much, Jeannie. I appreciate that. Let's see. Chasm. I put a bunch, dug up small swamp roses 14 years ago and moved in, and now forms 15 feet long, 12 feet tall. That is so cool. That is so cool for a hedge. That's awesome. And I bet, like your pollinators, like you said, absolutely love you for that. Yeah, I'm going to have to look at the swamp rose. I wrote it down. So after this live, that's going to be the next thing that I'm doing. You had an extremely wet spring, so loaded down with buds this year. Perfect. Covered with bumblebees. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, Jeannie, so, with roses, with growing roses from seed, patience is, a virtue, unfortunately. But the cool thing, though, about hybridizing roses, growing them from seed, is that, especially after the first year, you're going to have a couple different generations, right? You're going to have roses, for the current year that you're working on, and roses from the previous year, right? And they're at different stages. So, you do keep yourself busy. So like now, I wish I had more time in between doing everything, right? Because as I showed you before, watering was my issue this year. I need to figure out some kind of watering system for my roses for next year, so in that way, I'm not having to, water all my rose seedlings, twice a day, right? And then, or if I'm gone, from the house, trying to find somebody where I'm like, hey, can you water all my roses for me? And it takes about 30 minutes for me to water all of my rose seedlings, right? And that's one time. So I'm spending at least an hour every day watering my roses. So I need to figure out some kind of watering system. Yeah, I wish there was. I did have more time. But the cool thing about it, though, is that, when you are working with the seeds, especially the seeds, you're able to work with roses when it's wintertime, right? When none of our roses are growing outdoors, right? They're all dormant. So, you're able to kind of get your rose fix through their seeds when the roses in your garden aren't necessarily growing. Let's see. The way you grow is what makes them your roses. I got a name already. Bradley's Rose Works, Designing Nature by Design. That's awesome. That is awesome. And that's kind of the fun thing too, because every single rose seedling is genetically different than any other rose in the world from the past, present, future, right? Roses are just like people, they're all genetically different. So every single rose seedling that you have are, in fact, different varieties. And you are able, it's a little bit of a process, but you are able to register certain varieties of roses that you have, and you can give them a name. And kind of the fun part too about that is just kind of you know thinking about, oh, okay, well, if I did have a rose, what would I name it, right? And coming up with some names is kind of the fun part, right? But I always said that my first rose that I get registered is going to be named after my grandfather, because he was kind of the one who got me into gardening, into plants, and I was really close with him. So my first rose is going to be named after him. So, yeah. Yeah, perfect. So, yep, that's kind of what I'm doing today. Hopefully, I can finish up transplanting the rest of these. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you, how unperfect I am. So here you can see some of them have died. You can see I have powdery mildew on some of them. So a lot of these I'm not going to be potting up. So like, this tray here. At one point, I had almost every single cell that had a rose growing, but because of the watering issue, and because I just didn't have time, dealing with the spouse with cancer and my father-in-law in hospice, I lost a lot of them before I was able to get to them. But I have, quite a few hundred already transplanted. I planted 7,000 seeds, so way too many for me. Way too many for me. Yeah. Hey, Solomon, how are you? But yeah, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and end the live. For anybody that is a father in here, happy Father's Day to you. Hopefully you're having a good day. And if you're not a father, hopefully, that you have a good day with your father, or give him a call, hanging out with them, barbecue, whatever you're doing. But yeah, I think I kind of like usually I do my lives at like midnight because I am a night owl. And a lot of times I don't go to bed till like 7 in the morning, right? That's a little bit too late. Usually I don't go to bed till about 2 or 3. But I kind of like doing this live, earlier in the day, that way we're able to go out in the yard and take a look at everything. So I might be on my live tomorrow earlier as well. So kind of pick up where we left off or continue doing what we're doing. Usually I do my lives. I try to, at least a couple of times a week. But I started doing lives in the fall when I was harvesting the rose hips. So all of these seedlings, I don't know if anybody in here right now has followed me since then, but I was doing lives showing you getting these seeds, when these were seeds, out of the rose hips. So we were doing lives, getting them out of the rose hips and, getting them stored. Then in the wintertime, we were in my garage where I was freezing my butt off. But we were in my garage and I had set up a little table and we were cold stratifying rose seeds. When I planted these seeds, I planted these seeds when they were live. And some of the transplanting I've been doing live as well. So hopefully I'm going to be able to, I think I can on my front yard, and then with that pumpkin patch, and Easy Does It, I might do a live and show you how I do the pollinating as well. So that's kind of fun to do too. All right. So anyway, I hope you all have. Oh, let's see. How long does it take for getting roots? Are you talking about the rose seeds? So with the rose seeds, generally after you plant the rose seeds, after they're out of the refrigerator, because we do refrigerate, cold stratify is what it's called, cold stratification. But it just basic, basically it means that going through a winter, right? So we put our roses through a winter for 3 months. After that 12 weeks or 3 months, then we get them planted, and usually they start germinating, growing, getting roots anywhere from about 2 weeks to a month. A lot of it depends on the genetics of the rose, because they're all genetically different. So sometimes some roses can take a couple of months, 2-3 months, to start growing. That's where that patience comes into hand as well. But there are some rose seeds that will actually start germinating while they're still in the refrigerator. So when we do have them in the fridge, we do want to check on our seeds, at least once a week is what I suggest. And if you do notice any of your rose seeds that are starting to germinate, doesn't matter if they've been in there for 11 weeks or 5 weeks or however long, if they start growing, then you can take those seeds out at that time and get them planted. And then usually it only takes a couple days before they start popping up. But yeah, so anyway, I'm going to go ahead and head off for today. Maybe I might come back on later this evening when I start getting pollen, gathering pollen for my pollinations for tomorrow. So I might do that. If you're still on YouTube, and you see me pop back up, I might do that. So, thank you everybody for hanging out with me. Thank you for all the questions, the comments, the conversations. Sometimes lives can be a little bit quiet, and it can be a little difficult for me to just continue to talk. And it's like, I don't know what to say now. Everybody leaving comments in there just really helps me figure out what to talk about. But thank you so much for hanging out, liking the live. For anybody that's subscribed, I do appreciate that. It does help out so much. It's when the likes and the subscribers and all that, it's not for fame or fortune or anything like that, but my goal is to just spread my passion and love for roses. And that's kind of a good, when I get likes, when I get subscriptions, that just kind of, validates, my reasoning for doing all of this, because honestly, I'm not, I'm not, super comfortable doing these lives. Like some of these other people are really good on camera and they know what they're doing and they know everything, all the algorithms or whatever it is, and I just come on and I'm just myself, right? I'm just my awkward self, just seeing people, appreciating, what I'm trying to do, just spreading my passion and my journey, and, trying to get other people, inspiring others to do it as well, because it is so much fun, and I know that it can be pretty scary. So if I can offer a little bit of help or a little bit of a push, that people need to start doing it, then that's why I'm here. So, all right, awesome. Okay, well, thank you all very much. Happy Father's Day once again to all the fathers out there, and I will talk to you all later on. Maybe tonight, tomorrow, more than likely tomorrow, but maybe tonight. So, we'll talk to you later. You have a good day. Thank you.